Detective Sarah Martinez sat in her police car outside the downtown courthouse. It was a hot Tuesday morning in July. The radio crackled with reports from other officers around the city. Sarah had been a police officer for 12 years. She knew the streets well. Her radio buzzed. Unit 47, we have a complaint about a homeless man causing problems at the courthouse steps. Can you check it out? Sarah picked up the radio. Unit 47 responding. On my way. She drove the short distance to the front of the courthouse. Even from her car, she could see a man sitting on the concrete steps. He was talking loudly to himself. A few people walked past him quickly, looking worried. Sarah parked her car and got out. The smell hit her right away. It was the smell of someone who had not washed in weeks. Mixed with that was the strong smell of alcohol. She had smelled this combination many times before. The man was sitting with his back against the courthouse wall. His hair was long and dirty. His beard was thick and gray. His clothes were torn and stained. But something caught Sarah's eye. He was wearing what looked like an old military jacket. The green fabric was faded and had holes in it. As Sarah walked closer, she could hear what the man was saying. His words did not make much sense. He was talking about explosions and sand. He kept saying names over and over. Johnson, get down. Rodriguez, watch your left. Sarah stopped a few feet away from him. Sir, I'm Officer Martinez. I need to talk with you. The man looked up at her. His eyes were red and watery. He smelled strongly of cheap whiskey. For a moment, his eyes seemed to focus on her badge. Then they went blank again. Sir, people have called to complain about noise. I need you to move along. The man tried to stand up. He was shaky on his feet. Sarah could see he was very drunk. When he stood, she noticed he was tall, maybe 6 feet. Under all the dirt and torn clothes, she could see he had once been a strong man. I'm not doing anything wrong, the man said. His words were slurred. This is America. I can sit where I want. I understand, sir. But you're disturbing people who are trying to go to court. You need to move to another area. The man's face changed suddenly. His eyes got wide and scared. Court? No. I can't go back there. The judge, she doesn't understand. None of them understand. He started walking away from Sarah, but he was walking in circles. He seemed confused about which direction to go. Sarah followed him slowly. Sir, what's your name? Sergeant Williams, he said without thinking. Then he caught himself. I mean, just Williams. Just call me Williams. Sarah wrote this down in her notebook. Williams, I need your first name too. The man stopped walking and stared at her. For a second, Sarah saw something different in his eyes. It was like he was trying to remember something important. But then he started walking in circles again. The sand gets everywhere, he said loudly. You can't get it out of your boots. Johnson used to complain about it every day, but Johnson's not complaining anymore. A woman walking up the courthouse steps heard this and moved away quickly. She looked scared. Sarah knew she had to do something before more people got worried. Williams, I'm going to need you to come with me. You've been drinking and you're scaring people. I'm not drunk, Williams shouted. But as he said this, he stumbled and almost fell. Sarah caught his arm to steady him. When she touched him, Williams jerked away fast. Don't grab me. Enemy contact. Enemy contact! He raised his hands like he was holding a weapon. Several people nearby stopped and stared. Some of them started to back away. Sarah knew she had to act quickly. Williams, it's okay. There's no enemy here. You're safe. But Williams was not listening anymore. He was looking around like he was searching for something dangerous. His breathing was fast and shallow. Williams, I need you to calm down and come with me to the station. The station? Williams looked confused. What station? Are we getting extracted? Sarah could see that Williams was not just drunk. Something else was wrong with him. She had seen this before with some veterans, but right now she had to keep everyone safe. Sir, I'm placing you under arrest for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. Williams did not fight when Sarah put the handcuffs on him. As soon as the metal touched his wrists, he seemed to calm down. It was like he was used to being restrained. Sergeant Williams reporting for duty, he said quietly. Sarah led him to her police car. She opened the back door and helped him get in. Williams sat quietly now. He was staring straight ahead. As Sarah drove to the police station, she looked at Williams in her rearview mirror. He was still wearing that old military jacket. She wondered what his story was. She had arrested many homeless people over the years. Most of them had sad stories. But something about Williams seemed different. At the police station, Sarah helped Williams out of the car. The booking officer, Dave Chen, had worked there for 20 years. He had seen everything. "What do we have here, Sarah?" Dave asked. "Public intoxication and disturbing the peace. Says his name is Williams. Sergeant Williams." Dave looked at Williams carefully. "Military?" Sarah nodded. "Looks that way. Old army jacket. Talks about combat sometimes." Dave had been in the army himself years ago. He knew how to talk to veterans. "What's your full name, soldier?" Williams looked up at Dave. For a moment, his eyes were clear. "Sergeant Marcus Williams, sir. Rank?" "E5, sir. 3 tours, Afghanistan." Dave wrote this down. "Service dates?" But Williams had gone quiet again. He was staring at the floor now. They processed Williams through the booking system. They took his picture and fingerprints. They gave him a plastic cup of water and a sandwich. Williams ate the sandwich quickly, like he had not eaten in days. Sarah finished her paperwork and prepared to leave. Before she went, she stopped by Williams' cell. He was sitting on the narrow bed, still wearing his old military jacket. "Williams," she said softly, "you'll see a judge in the morning. Try to get some sleep." Williams looked up at her. "Thank you, ma'am. You're a good soldier." Sarah walked back to her car thinking about Marcus Williams. She wondered how a man who had served his country ended up drunk and homeless on courthouse steps. She had seen too many stories like this. Veterans who came home from war but never really came home. As she drove away from the station, Sarah made a mental note to check on Williams in the morning. Maybe she could help him find some services for veterans. Maybe someone could help him get back on his feet. But Sarah did not know that Marcus Williams had already been in the court system several times. She did not know that tomorrow he would face a judge who was tired of seeing the same homeless people again and again. She did not know that Judge Patricia Hoffman had no patience for repeat offenders, and Sarah definitely did not know that Marcus Williams was a decorated war hero who had saved the lives of 6 soldiers in Afghanistan. She did not know about the Bronze Star hidden in his jacket pocket, or about the friends he had lost, or about the nightmares that kept him awake every night. All Sarah knew was that she had arrested a homeless veteran who seemed lost and broken. Tomorrow, Marcus Williams would face a justice system that did not know his story, and sometimes not knowing someone's story can change everything. Judge Patricia Hoffman arrived at the courthouse at 7 in the morning. She always came early to review her cases before the day started. At 52 years old, she had been a judge for 20 years. She was known for being fair but tough. Patricia sat at her desk with a cup of coffee and opened the first file. It was going to be a busy day. She had 37 cases to hear. Most of them were small crimes like shoplifting, drunk driving, and disturbing the peace. She picked up the next file. "Marcus Williams," she read out loud. "Public intoxication, disturbing the peace. 3rd offense this year." Patricia shook her head. She saw the same names come through her courtroom over and over. These repeat offenders wasted everyone's time and money. They got arrested, spent a few days in jail, then went right back to the streets to cause more problems. Patricia's assistant, Maria Santos, knocked on her door. "Judge Hoffman, your 9 o'clock cases are ready. The public defenders want to know if they can have a few extra minutes to talk with their clients." "No," Patricia said firmly. "We're already behind schedule from yesterday. Tell them they should have prepared better." Maria nodded and left. Patricia finished reviewing her files and walked to her courtroom. The bailiff, Officer Robert Bob Thompson, was already there. Bob had worked in this courtroom for 15 years. He and Patricia worked well together. "Morning, Your Honor," Bob said. "We have a full house today." Patricia looked at the crowded courtroom. The defendants section was packed with people waiting for their cases to be called. Some were in jail uniforms. Others wore regular clothes but looked nervous and worried. In the back of the room sat family members and friends. Some were crying softly. Others looked angry. Patricia had seen these faces thousands of times before. "Let's get started," Patricia said as she took her seat behind the bench. The first few cases went quickly. A young man caught shoplifting got community service. A woman who had driven with a suspended license got a fine and more license suspension time. A teenager caught with marijuana got probation. Patricia worked through her list efficiently. She prided herself on keeping things moving. Some judges spent too much time listening to sob stories, she thought. Patricia believed in personal responsibility. People made choices and choices had consequences. "Next case," she called out. "Marcus Williams." Bob brought Marcus into the courtroom. Marcus was wearing an orange jail uniform now, but he still had his old military jacket over it. Bob had let him keep it because it was not against the rules. Marcus walked slowly to the defendant's table. His legs were shaky and he held onto the table for support. He had not slept well in jail. The small cell reminded him of other small spaces from long ago. Spaces where bad things had happened. Patricia looked at Marcus for the first time. She saw a dirty, unkempt man who looked older than his 45 years. His hair was messy and he needed a shave. To Patricia, he looked like every other homeless person who came through her courtroom. "Mr. Williams," she said, reading from her file, "you are charged with public intoxication and disturbing the peace. This is your third offense this year. How do you plead?" Marcus stood quietly for a moment. He was looking around the courtroom like he was trying to remember where he was. The fluorescent lights were very bright. They reminded him of the lights in the Army hospital where he had woken up after the explosion. "Sir," Patricia said more loudly, "I asked how you plead." The public defender assigned to Marcus was Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer was 26 years old and had been a lawyer for only 2 years. She was handling 43 cases that day. She had only been able to talk with Marcus for 5 minutes before court started. "Your Honor," Jennifer said, standing up, "could I have a brief recess to speak with my client? There may be some circumstances that the court should consider." Patricia looked at her watch. It was already 9:30, and she had only gotten through 8 cases. At this rate, she would be in court until 8 at night. "Ms. Walsh, you had all morning to speak with your client." "We need to keep moving. Mr. Williams, how do you plead?" Marcus was still staring at the lights. In his mind, he was back in Afghanistan. The explosion had been so bright, brighter than the sun. When he woke up, Johnson and Rodriguez were dead. The medic was working on someone else who was screaming, "Mr. Williams," Patricia said sharply. Marcus snapped back to the present. "What? I'm sorry, ma'am." What was the question? Patricia was getting frustrated. "Are you guilty or not guilty of public intoxication and disturbing the peace?" Marcus looked confused. He was not sure what he was supposed to say. "I don't remember disturbing anyone, ma'am. I was just sitting. That's not an answer to my question." "Guilty or not guilty?" Jennifer Walsh stood up again. "Your Honor, my client appears to be having difficulty understanding the proceedings. Perhaps we could—" "Ms. Walsh, your client is required to enter a plea." "Mr. Williams, I'll ask you one more time. Guilty or not guilty?" Marcus felt like the walls were closing in on him. The courtroom was full of people staring at him. He could hear whispers and see people pointing. It reminded him of the times when Army investigators had asked him questions about what happened to his squad. "I guess I'm guilty," Marcus said quietly. He just wanted this to be over. Patricia wrote something in her file. "Mr. Williams, I see this is your third offense for similar charges. Before I sentence you, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Marcus stood there silently. He was thinking about his squad again. Johnson had been 22 years old. He had a wife and a baby back home. Rodriguez was going to college when he got out of the Army. He wanted to be a teacher. "Mr. Williams, I'm waiting." Marcus looked up at Patricia. For a moment their eyes met. Patricia saw something in his eyes that made her pause. It was not the usual look of someone making excuses. It was the look of someone who was lost, but Patricia had seen this look before. Drug addicts and alcoholics all had the same lost expression. They all had sad stories about why they could not get their lives together. "Your Honor," Jennifer Walsh said, trying one more time, "my client is a military veteran. There may be underlying issues that—" "Ms. Walsh, being a veteran is not an excuse for breaking the law. Plenty of veterans manage to obey the law and contribute to society." Patricia looked back at Marcus. "Mr. Williams, you have been arrested 3 times this year for the same types of offenses. You are clearly not learning from the consequences of your actions. You are wasting police time, court time, and taxpayer money." Marcus was not really listening anymore. He was remembering the sound the explosion had made. It was like thunder, but louder and closer. After the explosion, there had been silence. Then the screaming started. "Mr. Williams, are you listening to me?" Marcus nodded, but he was not sure what he was agreeing to. Patricia continued. "The court has tried to be lenient with you. You have been given fines and short jail sentences. Nothing seems to work. You keep coming back here, which tells me you are not taking this seriously." Bob Thompson, the bailiff, was watching Marcus carefully. Bob had been in the military himself, though not in combat. Something about the way Marcus stood reminded Bob of soldiers he had known. Even in his current condition, Marcus had a certain posture that Bob recognized. "Mr. Williams," Patricia said, "I am going to give you a sentence that I hope will finally get your attention. Maybe some real time in jail will help you think about the choices you are making." Marcus was thinking about the letter he had tried to write to Johnson's wife. He had never sent it. What could he say? That he was sorry her husband was dead? That it should have been him instead? That he thought about Johnson every single day? "I sentence you to 90 days in the county jail," Patricia announced. The courtroom was quiet. Jennifer Walsh started to say something, but Patricia held up her hand. "Furthermore, Mr. Williams, I suggest you use this time to think about getting your life together. There are programs available for people who want help. But first, you have to want to help yourself." Marcus accepted the sentence without any emotion. 90 days in jail did not scare him. He had been in worse places. At least in jail he would have a bed and regular meals. At least in jail, he would not have to worry about finding a place to sleep. Bob Thompson walked over to Marcus to escort him out of the courtroom. As they walked, Bob noticed that Marcus moved with a slight limp. He also noticed that Marcus kept his shoulders straight, even though everything else about him seemed broken. "Sergeant Williams," Bob said quietly as they reached the door. Marcus stopped and looked at Bob with surprise. It had been a long time since anyone had called him by his rank. "Thank you for your service," Bob said. Marcus nodded once, then let Bob lead him back to his cell. As the courtroom cleared for the next case, Patricia was already looking at the next file. She had made her decision about Marcus Williams and moved on. She did not think about him again for the rest of the morning. But Jennifer Walsh was thinking about Marcus. She knew there was more to his story. She could see it in his eyes and hear it in the few words he had spoken. Unfortunately, she had 36 more cases that day, and no time to investigate further, and Marcus Williams was back in his cell, staring at the ceiling. He was thinking about Johnson and Rodriguez. He was thinking about the explosion. He was thinking about the letter he had never sent. Marcus Williams stood in the defendant's box listening to Judge Patricia Hoffman read his sentence. The words seemed to come from far away. 90 days in county jail. He had heard worse news before. "Mr. Williams, do you understand the sentence I have given you?" Judge Hoffman asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. 90 days, that's correct. And I want you to use this time to think about your life. Think about the choices that brought you here. Think about how you can do better when you get out." Marcus wanted to tell her that he thought about his choices every day. He thought about the choice to join the army. He thought about the choice to volunteer for that patrol. He thought about the choice to go back for Johnson and Rodriguez when the shooting started. But he knew she would not understand. "The court hopes that this sentence will help you turn your life around," Judge Hoffman continued. "There are programs in the jail that can help you. Programs for addiction. Programs for job training. But you have to want to participate." Marcus nodded again. He had heard about these programs before. They were meant for people who wanted to get better. Marcus was not sure he deserved to get better. Good soldiers like Johnson and Rodriguez were dead. Why should he get to have a better life? "Bailiff Thompson, please escort Mr. Williams back to holding," Judge Hoffman said. Bob Thompson walked over to Marcus. "Come on, Williams. Time to go." As they walked toward the door, Marcus felt something in his jacket pocket shift. It was a small metal object that he always carried with him. He had not looked at it in months, but he always made sure it was there. The courtroom was already moving on to the next case. Judge Hoffman was calling out another name. Another person in trouble with the law. The system kept moving like a machine that never stopped. Marcus paused at the defendant's table to steady himself. The 90-day sentence was longer than his last 2 jail stays combined. He would be locked up until October. He tried to remember what month it was now. July, he thought. Or maybe August. As Marcus gripped the edge of the table, something fell out of his jacket pocket. It was small and landed silently on the floor. Neither Marcus nor Bob Thompson noticed it fall. The small object slid under the defendant's table, where it would not be seen by the people now filling the courtroom for the next case. Bob led Marcus down the hallway toward the holding cells. The hallway was long and painted a dull green color. The floors were shiny from being mopped every morning, but they still smelled like disinfectant and fear. "Williams," Bob said as they walked, "you seem different from the usual guys we get in here." Marcus did not answer. He was thinking about the cell he would live in for the next 3 months. He wondered if it would have a window. He hoped it would not be too small. Small spaces made him think of the armored vehicle he had been riding in when the bomb exploded. I was in the service too, Bob continued. Navy. Never saw combat like you probably did, but I understand the military life. Marcus looked at Bob with mild interest. What years? 1995 to 1999. Spent most of my time on a ship in the Pacific. Not very exciting, but it was good experience. They reached the holding area. Bob opened a heavy metal door and led Marcus inside. There were several cells along one wall. Most of them were empty since it was still morning and most prisoners had already been processed. This will be your home for a while, Bob said, opening one of the cell doors. It's not the worst place in the world. Marcus looked into the small cell. There was a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a small sink, and a toilet. The walls were concrete painted white. There was one small window near the ceiling, but it was too high to see out of. When do I get moved to the main jail? Marcus asked. Probably this afternoon. They'll come get you when there's space in the transport van. Marcus sat down on the bed. The mattress was harder than the ground where he usually slept, but it was cleaner. He had slept in worse places. Much worse places. Bob was about to leave, but something made him stop. Williams, can I ask you something? Marcus looked up at him. What branch were you in? Army. How long? 8 years. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Bob nodded. That's tough duty. When did you get out? Marcus had to think about this. Time had become difficult for him to track. 2 years ago, I think. Maybe 3. Have you tried getting help from the VA? Marcus let out a bitter laugh. The VA, yeah, I tried that. What happened? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to talk. More than he had talked to anyone in months. When I got back, I went to the VA hospital. Told them about the headaches, the nightmares, the times when I can't remember where I am. They said they would help me. They gave me some papers to fill out. Bob listened carefully. The papers asked about my service record, about what happened over there. I tried to fill them out, but every time I started writing about the explosion, my hands would shake so bad I couldn't hold the pen. Marcus stared at the floor of his cell. I went back to the VA 3 times. Each time they said they needed more paperwork, more forms, more proof of what happened to me. They wanted medical records from the Army, but some of those records were lost when our base got attacked. So you never got help? I got frustrated. Started drinking to make the nightmares stop. When you're drunk, you don't dream. When you don't dream, you don't see Johnson and Rodriguez getting blown up over and over again. Bob was quiet for a moment. Who were Johnson and Rodriguez? My soldiers, good kids. They died because of a choice I made. Marcus lay down on the narrow bed and turned toward the wall. The conversation was over. Bob locked the cell door and walked back down the hallway. He was thinking about what Marcus had said. Bob had seen many veterans come through this jail over the years. Most of them had similar stories. They came back from war changed, tried to get help, got lost in bureaucracy, and ended up on the streets. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, Janet Rodriguez was starting her afternoon cleaning routine. Janet had been a court clerk for 10 years. She took pride in keeping the courtroom neat and organized. Janet swept under the defendant's table and found the small object that had fallen from Marcus's pocket. It was a military medal attached to a ribbon. The medal was tarnished and the ribbon was faded, but Janet could still read the words engraved on it. Bronze Star Medal, she read quietly, for heroic achievement. Janet had seen many things in her years working at the courthouse, but she had never found a bronze star under the defendant's table. She turned the medal over and saw an engraving on the back. Sergeant Marcus Williams, 3rd Infantry Division. Janet sat down in one of the courtroom chairs and stared at the medal. Marcus Williams was the homeless man who had just been sentenced to 90 days in jail. Judge Hoffman had talked to him like he was just another repeat offender who did not care about his life. But people who win bronze stars are heroes. They save lives. They do brave things under fire. Janet wondered what Marcus Williams had done to earn this medal. She thought about taking the medal to Judge Hoffman right away. But the judge was busy with afternoon cases. Janet decided to do some research first. She wanted to know more about Marcus Williams before she talked to anyone. Janet went to her computer and looked up information about Bronze Star medals. She learned that they are given to soldiers who show heroic or meritorious achievement in combat. She learned that Bronze Stars are serious awards not given out lightly. Then Janet searched for Marcus Williams in the court's computer system. She found his previous arrests. All of them were for small crimes like public intoxication, trespassing, and disturbing the peace. Nothing violent. Nothing that hurt other people. Janet also found Marcus's military ID number in the police report from his arrest. She wrote it down and decided to do more research when she got home that evening. As Janet finished cleaning the courtroom, she kept thinking about the medal in her pocket. She thought about Marcus Williams sitting in a jail cell, sentenced by a judge who had no idea that he was a decorated war hero. That evening, Janet went home to her small apartment and got on her computer. She searched for information about Marcus Williams and his military service. What she found shocked her. Marcus Williams had served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 3rd Infantry Division. He had been promoted to sergeant and had led a squad of young soldiers. On his last tour, his squad had been ambushed while on patrol outside Kandahar. Janet found a news article from a military website. The headline read, "Local Soldier Saves Squad in Afghanistan Ambush." The article was 3 years old, but it told the story of how Sergeant Marcus Williams had risked his life to save his fellow soldiers when their convoy was attacked. According to the article, Marcus's convoy had been hit by a roadside bomb. 2 soldiers were killed instantly and several others were wounded. Marcus, despite being injured himself, had organized the defense and evacuation of his squad. He had carried wounded soldiers to safety while under enemy fire. The article said that Marcus's actions had saved at least 6 lives. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his heroism and was medically retired from the Army due to injuries from the explosion. Janet printed out the article and stared at the picture of Marcus in his dress uniform. He looked proud and strong. His eyes were clear and focused. He looked nothing like the broken man who had stood before Judge Hoffman that morning. Janet Rodriguez arrived at work early the next morning. She had not slept well. All night, she had thought about the Bronze Star medal sitting on her kitchen table and the article she had printed about Marcus Williams. Janet unlocked her desk drawer and pulled out the medal. In the morning light coming through the courthouse windows, she could see how old and worn it was. The bronze had turned dark with age and the ribbon was frayed at the edges. But the engraving was still clear, for heroic achievement. Judge Hoffman would not arrive for another hour. Janet had time to do more research. She went to her computer and typed in Marcus Williams's military ID number again. This time she searched different websites. She found more details about Marcus's military service. He had joined the Army when he was 19 years old. His first tour in Afghanistan was when he was 21. By the time he was 25, he was a sergeant leading his own squad. Janet found records showing that Marcus had received several awards during his military service. Besides the Bronze Star, he had earned a Purple Heart for being wounded in combat. He had also received commendation medals and service ribbons, but it was the Bronze Star citation that made Janet's hands shake as she read it. Sergeant Marcus Williams distinguished himself by heroic achievement while engaged in combat operations against enemy forces in Afghanistan. When his convoy was attacked by insurgents using improvised explosive devices and small arms fire, Sergeant Williams immediately took charge of the situation despite being wounded in the initial blast. Janet continued reading. With complete disregard for his own safety, Sergeant Williams organized the defense of his position and directed the evacuation of wounded soldiers. He personally carried 2 critically wounded soldiers to safety while under heavy enemy fire. His quick thinking and brave actions saved the lives of 6 soldiers and prevented the capture of sensitive military equipment. The citation was signed by a colonel and dated 2 years ago. Janet sat back in her chair and stared at the computer screen. This was not just any veteran. This was a genuine hero who had saved lives under the worst possible conditions. And yesterday, Judge Hoffman had sentenced him to 90 days in jail like he was a common criminal. Janet printed out the Bronze Star citation and put it in a folder with the news article she had found the night before. She was not sure what to do with this information, but she knew she had to do something. At 8 o'clock, Judge Hoffman arrived at the courthouse. Janet could hear her heels clicking on the marble floor as she walked to her office. Judge Hoffman always wore the same type of shoes, black leather pumps with low heels. Practical shoes for a practical woman. Janet waited until 9 o'clock when Judge Hoffman usually finished reviewing her morning cases. Then she knocked on the judge's office door. "Come in," Judge Hoffman called out. Janet opened the door and stepped inside. Judge Hoffman's office was neat and organized, just like the judge herself. Law books lined the walls and certificates and awards hung in perfect rows. "Good morning, Janet. What can I do for you?" Janet sat down in the chair across from Judge Hoffman's desk. She opened her folder and pulled out the Bronze Star Medal. "Judge Hoffman, I found this in the courtroom yesterday after the Williams case." Judge Hoffman looked at the medal without much interest. "Someone must have dropped it. Put it in the lost and found box." "Your Honor, this medal belongs to Marcus Williams, the man you sentenced yesterday." Judge Hoffman looked more closely at the medal. She could see the engraving with Marcus's name. "I see. Well, make sure it gets returned to him when he gets out of jail." Janet took a deep breath. "Judge Hoffman, I think you should read this." She handed the judge the Bronze Star citation and the news article about Marcus's heroism in Afghanistan. Judge Hoffman read the citation first. Her expression did not change as she read about Marcus saving his fellow soldiers. When she finished, she set the paper down on her desk. "Janet, this is very interesting, but it doesn't change anything. Mr. Williams broke the law multiple times. Military service doesn't give someone the right to disturb the peace and get drunk in public." Janet was surprised by the judge's reaction. "But, Your Honor, doesn't this explain why he might be having problems? He was wounded in combat. He probably has PTSD or brain injuries." Judge Hoffman leaned back in her chair. "Janet, I see dozens of veterans come through my courtroom every year. Some of them adjust to civilian life just fine. Others use their military service as an excuse for bad behavior. I can't treat people differently just because they served in the military." "But Judge Hoffman, look at what he did. He saved 6 lives. He's a hero." "He was a hero," Judge Hoffman corrected. "That was then. This is now. Right now, he's a homeless man who breaks the law and wastes taxpayer money." Janet felt frustrated. She had expected Judge Hoffman to be shocked by this information. She had expected her to want to help Marcus. What if there were circumstances you didn't know about? What if he tried to get help from the VA but couldn't? What if his problems are caused by his service to our country? Judge Hoffman stood up from her desk. "Janet, I appreciate your concern, but my job is to enforce the law fairly and equally. I can't start investigating every defendant's background story. If I did that, I would never get through my caseload." Janet put the citation and article back in her folder. "So you're not going to do anything?" "There's nothing to do. Mr. Williams received a fair sentence based on his criminal record. The fact that he was once a good soldier doesn't change the fact that he's now a repeat offender." Janet left Judge Hoffman's office feeling disappointed. She had been sure that once the judge knew Marcus's story, everything would change. But Judge Hoffman seemed to think that Marcus's past heroism was irrelevant to his current situation. Janet spent the rest of the morning thinking about Marcus Williams. During her lunch break, she decided to do more research. She wanted to understand what had happened to Marcus after he left the Army. Janet called the Veterans Administration Hospital and asked to speak to someone about Marcus Williams. After being transferred several times, she spoke to a social worker named David Kim. "I can't give you specific details about any patient," David told her. "But I can tell you that we see many veterans like the one you're describing. Combat veterans with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries often have difficulty navigating our system." "What do you mean?" Janet asked. "The paperwork can be overwhelming, especially for someone with cognitive issues from a brain injury. We require extensive documentation of their service and medical history. If they can't provide the right paperwork, they can't get services. But what if their records were lost or destroyed? That happens sometimes. Military records can be lost due to various reasons: computer crashes, base attacks, clerical errors. When that happens, it can take months or years to reconstruct someone's service history." Janet thought about what Marcus had told Bailiff Thompson about trying to fill out VA forms but being unable to write about the explosion. "What? About mental health services?" she asked. "We have programs, but there are waiting lists. And many veterans don't trust the system after bad experiences. Some of them try to get help once or twice, get frustrated, and give up." After lunch, Janet couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. She decided to visit him in jail. She had never visited a prisoner before, but she felt like she needed to talk to him. The county jail was a gray concrete building 10 minutes from the courthouse. Janet had driven past it thousands of times but had never been inside. The lobby was stark and unwelcoming, with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. Janet told the guard at the front desk that she wanted to visit Marcus Williams. She had to fill out paperwork and show her ID. Then she waited for 30 minutes before being called back to the visiting area. The visiting area had a thick glass wall with phones on both sides. Janet sat down and waited for Marcus to be brought in. When Marcus appeared on the other side of the glass, Janet was shocked by how different he looked. In just 2 days, he seemed smaller and more fragile. His eyes were red and his hands shook slightly. Marcus picked up the phone on his side of the glass. "Do I know you?" he asked. "I'm Janet Rodriguez. I work at the courthouse. I clean the courtrooms." Marcus nodded but looked confused about why she was there. "I found something that belongs to you," Janet said. She held up the Bronze Star medal so he could see it through the glass. Marcus's expression changed completely. His eyes focused on the medal, and for a moment Janet could see the soldier he used to be. "Where did you find that?" Marcus asked quietly. "It fell out of your jacket in the courtroom. I've been keeping it safe for you." Marcus stared at the medal for a long time without speaking. "I read about what you did in Afghanistan," Janet said. "About how you saved your squad." Marcus's face went pale. "You shouldn't have read that. Why not?" "You're a hero. People should know what you did." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not a hero. Heroes don't let their soldiers die. Johnson and Rodriguez died because of me. That's not what the citation says. It says you saved 6 lives. But I couldn't save them all." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "I made the decision to take that road. I knew it might be dangerous, but I thought we could handle it. I was wrong." Janet could see tears in Marcus's eyes. "The explosion happened so fast," Marcus continued. Janet Rodriguez could not get Marcus Williams out of her mind. All weekend, she thought about their conversation through the jail's glass wall. She thought about the pain in his eyes when he talked about Johnson and Rodriguez. She thought about how he called himself a failure instead of a hero. On Monday morning, Janet arrived at work with a plan. She was not going to give up on Marcus Williams. Judge Hoffman might not want to hear about his military service, but Janet was going to make her listen. Janet had spent the weekend learning everything she could about PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. She had printed out articles from medical websites and veteran advocacy groups. She had found statistics about veteran homelessness that shocked her. According to what Janet had read, about 11% of all homeless adults were veterans. Every night, almost 40,000 veterans slept on the streets or in shelters. Many of them had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, just like Marcus. Janet also learned that veteran suicide rates were much higher than civilian suicide rates. 22 veterans killed themselves every day in America. That was 1 veteran suicide every 65 minutes. These numbers made Janet angry. How could a country let its heroes suffer like this? How could the system fail people who had risked their lives for their country? When Judge Hoffman arrived at work, Janet was waiting for her. "Judge Hoffman, could I speak with you again about Marcus Williams?" Judge Hoffman looked tired. "Janet, we discussed this last week." "My decision stands." "I know, but I've learned more about his situation. I think there are things you need to know." Judge Hoffman sighed. "Janet, I appreciate your concern, but I have 32 cases to review before court starts. I don't have time for this. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I promise it will be worth your time." Judge Hoffman looked at Janet for a moment. Janet had worked in the courthouse for 10 years and had never asked for anything like this before. "Fine, 5 minutes." Janet followed Judge Hoffman into her office and sat down across from her desk. "Judge Hoffman, did you know that veterans are twice as likely to become homeless as civilians? Did you know that 50% of homeless veterans have disabilities related to their military service?" "Janet, I'm sure these statistics are very sad, but they don't change the fact that Mr. Williams broke the law." Janet pulled out the articles she had printed. "Did you know that many veterans with PTSD and brain injuries have trouble with paperwork and bureaucracy? Did you know that the VA has lost thousands of military service records over the years?" Judge Hoffman was looking at her watch. Judge Hoffman, Marcus Williams tried to get help from the VA when he first came home, but he couldn't fill out the forms because writing about the explosion made his hands shake. When he went back for help, they told him he needed more paperwork, more proof, more documentation. Janet could see that Judge Hoffman was listening now, even if she didn't want to be, so he gave up and started drinking to stop the nightmares. That's when his life fell apart. That's how a war hero ended up homeless on courthouse steps. Judge Hoffman was quiet for a moment. "Even if all of that is true, Janet, what do you expect me to do? I can't change his sentence now." He pleaded guilty. But you could look into his case. You could find out what services are available for him. You could make sure he gets help instead of just punishment. Judge Hoffman stood up from her desk. Janet, that's not how the legal system works. I'm a judge, not a social worker. My job is to apply the law fairly, not to solve everyone's personal problems. Janet felt frustrated. But what if the law isn't fair? What if the system is failing the people who served our country? That may be true, but it's not my job to fix the system. It's my job to work within it. Janet left Judge Hoffman's office feeling defeated, but she was not ready to give up. During her lunch break, Janet called the Veterans Administration again. This time, she asked to speak to someone in the benefits department. She wanted to find out exactly what had happened with Marcus's case. After being transferred several times, Janet spoke to a benefits counselor named Patricia Moore. I can't give you specific information about any individual case, Patricia said, but I can tell you about our general procedures. What happens when a veteran comes in asking for help with PTSD? Janet asked. They need to fill out several forms documenting their military service and their current symptoms. Then we need medical records from their time in service. If they were wounded in combat, we need documentation of those injuries. What if those records were lost? That does happen sometimes. When it does, the veteran can request copies from the Department of Defense, but that process can take 6 months to a year. What are veterans supposed to do while they wait? There are some emergency services available, but they're limited. Most veterans have to wait for their paperwork to be processed before they can get full benefits. Janet thought about Marcus waiting months for paperwork while his mental health got worse and worse. Is there anything that can speed up the process? Janet asked. Sometimes. If the veteran has documentation from other sources, police reports, hospital records, letters from fellow soldiers, those can help establish their service record. After work, Janet drove to the county jail again. She wanted to talk to Marcus about his VA experience. Maybe there was something that could be done to help him. This time, Marcus looked even worse than before. He had dark circles under his eyes and his hands shook when he picked up the phone. How are you holding up? Janet asked. Marcus shrugged. I've been in worse places. I've been researching your situation with the VA. I think there might be ways to get your benefits processed faster. Marcus looked at her with surprise. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Because what happened to you isn't right. You served your country and saved lives. You deserve better than this. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I told you before I'm not a hero. I couldn't save Johnson and Rodriguez. Marcus, you saved 6 other soldiers. You carried wounded men to safety while people were shooting at you. That makes you a hero. Those 6 soldiers went home to their families because of me, Marcus said slowly, but Johnson and Rodriguez didn't. Their families got folded flags instead of husbands and sons. Janet could see the pain in Marcus's eyes. Marcus, their deaths weren't your fault. You were all in a war zone. Bad things happen in wars. But I was their sergeant. I was supposed to keep them safe. I made the decision to take that road. You couldn't have known there was a bomb there. Marcus stared at the table between them. The thing is, I did know it might be dangerous. Intelligence reports said there had been attacks in that area, but we needed to get supplies to another base, and that was the fastest route. Marcus paused, then continued. I thought we could handle it. I thought our armor was good enough, our training was good enough. I was wrong. Janet could see that Marcus had been carrying this guilt for years. Marcus, you made the best decision you could with the information you had. That's what leaders do. Leaders don't get their soldiers killed. Leaders make hard choices in impossible situations, and when things go wrong, they save as many people as they can. That's exactly what you did. Marcus looked up at Janet. Why do you care so much about this? Janet thought about her answer. Because I work in the courthouse every day. I see people come through who have made mistakes, who have problems, who need help. Most of the time they just get punished and sent away. Nobody asks why they're in trouble or how they got there. She paused. But when I found your medal and read about what you did, I realized that sometimes the people who look like criminals are actually heroes who just lost their way. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, What kind of help do you think you can get me? Janet pulled out some papers she had brought. I called the VA today. There are ways to speed up your benefits process if we can find documentation of your service. Do you have any letters or documents from your time in the Army? Marcus shook his head. I lost everything when I became homeless. I had a storage unit for a while, but I couldn't pay for it. What about your fellow soldiers? Are you in touch with any of them? Some of them tried to stay in touch when I first got back. But I wasn't good company. I pushed everyone away. Janet made notes on her papers. Do you remember their names? Maybe I could track some of them down. Marcus gave her the names of 3 soldiers from his unit who had survived the explosion. Janet wrote them down carefully. Marcus, I'm going to do everything I can to help you get the benefits you deserve, but I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll try to get better. Promise me you'll participate in whatever programs are available to you. Marcus looked skeptical. I don't know if I can get better. I've been like this for too long. You won't know unless you try, and you owe it to Johnson and Rodriguez to try. Marcus winced when she mentioned their names. Think about it this way, Janet continued. They died serving their country. If you don't get help, if you don't try to have a good life, then their sacrifice meant nothing. But if you get better, if you help other veterans, if you make something positive out of your pain, then their deaths have meaning. Marcus stared at Janet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. That evening, Janet went home and started making phone calls. Judge Patricia Hoffman sat in her home office that evening, trying to concentrate on case files for the next day. But she kept thinking about her conversation with Janet Rodriguez. The court clerk's words echoed in her mind. What if the system is failing the people who served our country? Patricia had been a judge for 20 years. She prided herself on being fair and consistent. She treated everyone the same, regardless of their background or circumstances. That was what justice meant, equal treatment under the law. But Janet's questions had planted a seed of doubt in Patricia's mind. Had she been too quick to judge Marcus Williams? Had she missed something important about his case? Patricia walked to her kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. Through her window, she could see her neighbor's American flag hanging from their front porch. The flag reminded her of something her father had once told her. Patricia's father had been a Marine in Vietnam. He had never talked much about his service, but when Patricia graduated from law school, he had given her a piece of advice. Remember that some of the people who come before you in court fought for the right to be there. At the time, Patricia had thought it was just one of her father's patriotic speeches. But now, 20 years later, those words took on new meaning. Patricia went back to her office and opened her laptop. She typed Marcus Williams Bronze Star into the search engine. Several results came up, including the news article that Janet had shown her. Patricia read the article more carefully this time. It described how Marcus had organized the defense of his position after the roadside bomb exploded. It told how he had carried wounded soldiers to safety while under enemy fire. It quoted his commanding officer saying that Marcus's actions had prevented a complete disaster. Patricia found herself staring at the photograph of Marcus in his dress uniform. He looked so young and confident. His eyes were clear and focused. He looked nothing like the broken man who had stood before her in court. Patricia searched for more information about veteran homelessness. What she found shocked her. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, about 40,000 veterans were homeless on any given night. Many of them suffered from PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, or substance abuse problems related to their military service. Patricia read about the challenges veterans faced when trying to get help from the VA. Long waiting lists, complex paperwork, lost records, bureaucratic mistakes that could take months or years to fix. She read testimonials from veterans who had tried to get help, but had given up in frustration. Some of them described experiences similar to what Marcus had told Bailiff Thompson, being asked to fill out forms about traumatic experiences that were too painful to write about. As Patricia read, she began to understand how a war hero could end up homeless and in jail. The system that was supposed to help veterans transition back to civilian life had failed Marcus Williams. And then the justice system had failed him too. Patricia thought about the way she had handled Marcus's case. She had seen a homeless man who had broken the law multiple times. She had not seen a wounded veteran who needed help. She had sentenced him to 90 days in jail without learning anything about his background or circumstances. For the first time in her career, Patricia wondered if she had made a serious mistake. The next morning, Patricia arrived at work early. She wanted to review Marcus Williams' file again before court started. She read through the police reports from his 3 arrests. All of them were for minor offenses: public intoxication, disturbing the peace, trespassing. Patricia noticed something she had missed before. In each police report there were notes about Marcus's behavior. He talked about explosions and called out names of people who were not there. He seemed confused about where he was. He showed signs of paranoia and anxiety. These were not the behaviors of a typical drunk. These were symptoms of someone suffering from severe PTSD and possibly traumatic brain injury. Patricia also noticed that Marcus had never committed any violent crimes. He had never hurt anyone or stolen anything. His only crimes were being homeless and having mental health episodes in public. At 9 o'clock, Janet Rodriguez knocked on Patricia's office door. "Judge Hoffman, I have more information about Marcus Williams. Come in, Janet." Janet sat down and opened a folder full of documents. "I found one of Marcus's fellow soldiers. His name is Tom Bradley, and he was with Marcus the day he was wounded. Tom has kept copies of their unit's records, including documentation of the attack where Marcus earned his Bronze Star." Janet handed Patricia several pages of military documents. There were after-action reports, medical records, and photographs of Marcus's unit in Afghanistan. Tom also wrote a letter describing what Marcus did that day. Janet continued. She handed Patricia a handwritten letter. Patricia read Tom Bradley's letter slowly. It described the roadside bomb explosion in vivid detail. It told how Marcus had immediately taken charge of the situation, despite being wounded himself. It explained how Marcus had organized the defense and evacuated the wounded soldiers one by one. According to Tom, Janet said, Marcus saved 6 lives that day. 3 of those soldiers are alive today because Marcus carried them to safety while people were shooting at him. Patricia set the letter down on her desk. "Janet, why are you doing all this research? This is way beyond your job responsibilities." Janet was quiet for a moment. "Judge Hoffman, my brother was in the Army. He served 2 tours in Iraq. When he came home, he was different. He had nightmares and anger problems. He started drinking too much." Janet's voice got emotional. "My family tried to help him, but we didn't know how. He tried to get help from the VA, but it took 8 months for them to approve his disability claim. By then, he had already lost his job and his apartment. What happened to him? He got help eventually. It took 3 years, but he's doing better now. He has a job and a place to live. But it was close. He almost ended up on the streets just like Marcus." Janet looked directly at Patricia. "The difference is that my brother had a family who fought for him. Marcus Williams has nobody. Nobody except maybe us." Patricia felt a weight settling on her chest. She was beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistake. "Janet, what do you think I should do?" "I think you should visit Marcus in jail. I think you should hear his story from him. And I think you should find a way to get him the help he needs instead of just punishing him." That afternoon, Patricia did something she had never done in 20 years as a judge. She drove to the county jail to visit a defendant she had sentenced. The jail's visiting area was depressing. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the air smelled like disinfectant and despair. Patricia sat down at one of the visiting stations and waited for Marcus to be brought in. When Marcus appeared on the other side of the glass wall, Patricia was shocked by his appearance. In just a week, he seemed to have aged years. His eyes were hollow and his hands shook when he picked up the phone. "Do you know who I am?" Patricia asked. Marcus studied her face for a moment. "You're the judge who sentenced me." "That's right. I'm Judge Hoffman." Marcus looked confused. "Why are you here?" Patricia took a deep breath. "I'm here because I think I made a mistake. I sentenced you without knowing your story. I want to hear that story now." Marcus stared at her through the glass. "What story?" "I'm a homeless drunk who breaks the law. You already know everything you need to know. I know you served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I know you earned a Bronze Star for saving your fellow soldiers. I know you've been struggling since you came home." Marcus's expression changed. "Who told you that?" "A court clerk named Janet Rodriguez found your medal. She's been researching your case. She found one of your fellow soldiers, Tom Bradley." At the mention of Tom's name, Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Tom's okay?" "He's fine. He lives in Ohio now. He told us what you did the day you were wounded. He said you saved his life." Marcus shook his head. "I couldn't save them all." "Marcus, tell me about Johnson and Rodriguez." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he began to speak, slowly and quietly. "Johnson was 22. He had just gotten married before we deployed. He showed everyone pictures of his wife every day. Said he was going to buy her a house when he got back. Marcus paused, staring at the table. Rodriguez was 19, youngest guy in our squad. He was always making jokes, trying to keep everyone's spirits up. He wanted to be a teacher when he got out. Said he wanted to help kids in poor neighborhoods like where he grew up. What happened to them? We were on a supply run. I made the decision to take the main road instead of the longer route. I knew there had been attacks in that area, but I thought we could handle it. I thought our armor was good enough. Marcus's voice broke. The bomb was buried right in the middle of the road. When it went off, Johnson and Rodriguez were killed instantly. They never had a chance. Patricia could see the pain in Marcus's eyes. Marcus, that wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known there was a bomb there. But I could have taken the safer route. It would have added 2 hours to our trip, but everyone would have come home alive. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. Marcus looked up at Patricia. Do you know what the worst part is? After the explosion, when I was pulling the wounded guys to safety, I kept thinking that it should have been me. The next morning, Judge Patricia Hoffman arrived at work with a new sense of purpose. She had spent most of the night researching legal options for helping Marcus Williams. What she found gave her hope. As a judge, Patricia had the authority to modify sentences under certain circumstances. She could also order alternative sentencing that included treatment programs instead of just jail time. She had rarely used these options before, but Marcus's case was going to change that. Patricia called Janet Rodriguez into her office first thing in the morning. Janet, I want you to contact Tom Bradley, the soldier you spoke with. Ask him if he can come here this week to provide testimony about Marcus's military service. Janet's face lit up. You're going to help Marcus? I'm going to do everything in my power to get him the help he needs. But I need you to help me gather all the documentation we can find. Janet pulled out a thick folder. I've been working on that. Tom Bradley sent me copies of Marcus's service records, medical reports from his injuries, and the full citation for his Bronze Star. I also have contact information for 2 other soldiers from his unit. Patricia looked through the documents. The military records painted a picture of an exemplary soldier who had served his country with distinction. The medical reports showed that Marcus had suffered serious injuries in the roadside bomb explosion, including a traumatic brain injury and shrapnel wounds. This is excellent work. Janet, now I need you to contact the Veterans Administration. Find out exactly what services Marcus is entitled to and why he never received them. While Janet made phone calls, Patricia researched treatment programs for veterans with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. She found several residential programs that specialized in helping combat veterans transition back to civilian life. The best program was called New Horizons Veterans Recovery Center. It was located 50 miles outside the city and offered comprehensive treatment including medical care, mental health counseling, job training, and housing assistance. Patricia called New Horizons and spoke to the director, Dr. Sarah Chen. Dr. Chen, I have a veteran who needs immediate help. He's currently in jail, but he's a Bronze Star recipient who's been suffering from untreated PTSD and TBI for years. Judge Hoffman, we see cases like this more often than we'd like. Many veterans fall through the cracks before they find us. What kind of help are you looking for? I want to modify his sentence to include treatment at your facility instead of jail time. Is that something you can accommodate? Absolutely. We work with courts regularly on alternative sentencing for veterans. How soon can you get him here? I'm planning to hold a hearing this week. If everything goes well, he could be transferred by the weekend. Dr. Chen explained the program in detail. Veterans stayed at New Horizons for 3 to 6 months depending on their needs. They receive medical treatment, trauma counseling, addiction recovery services, and job training. The program had an 80% success rate for helping veterans achieve stable housing and employment. Dr. Chen, this veteran has been carrying enormous guilt about losing soldiers under his command. He blames himself for their deaths. Survivor's guilt is very common among combat veterans, especially those who were in leadership positions. We have specialized therapy programs that help veterans work through those feelings. Many of our counselors are veterans themselves who understand exactly what he's going through. Patricia felt hopeful for the first time since learning about Marcus's situation. What do you need from me to get him admitted? Just his military records, medical history, and a court order for the alternative sentencing. We can handle the rest. After hanging up with Dr. Chen, Patricia called the district attorney's office. She needed to make sure they would support modifying Marcus's sentence. District Attorney Robert Martinez had worked with Patricia for 15 years. He was known for being tough on crime, but he was also fair and reasonable. "Bob, I need to talk to you about a case. Marcus Williams, the homeless veteran I sentenced to 90 days last week." "What about him?" Patricia explained everything she had learned about Marcus's military service and his struggles with the VA system. "Bob, I want to modify his sentence. Instead of jail time, I want to send him to a residential treatment program for veterans." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Patricia, you know I support our veterans, but we can't just ignore the law because someone served in the military." "I'm not ignoring the law. I'm using judicial discretion to find a better solution. This man needs medical treatment, not punishment." Patricia could hear Robert thinking on the other end of the phone. "What kind of treatment program are we talking about?" Patricia explained New Horizons and its success rates. She emphasized that Marcus would be supervised and accountable during his treatment, just like he would be in jail. "And if he doesn't complete the program?" Robert asked. "Then he serves the original 90-day sentence. But Bob, I think he'll succeed. He's a decorated war hero who just needs help getting back on his feet." Robert agreed to support the sentence modification. "Patricia, I think you're doing the right thing. This guy sacrificed for our country. The least we can do is help him when he needs it." On Wednesday morning, Patricia scheduled a special hearing for Marcus Williams. She arranged for Tom Bradley to testify via video conference from Ohio. Janet had also managed to contact Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the Army psychiatrist who had treated Marcus immediately after his injuries. The courtroom was unusually full for the hearing. Word had spread among courthouse staff about Marcus's story. Bailiff Bob Thompson was there, along with several other court employees who wanted to see what would happen. Marcus was brought into the courtroom wearing his orange jail uniform, but this time he also wore his Bronze Star medal on his chest. Janet had arranged for it to be returned to him for the hearing. Public Defender Jennifer Walsh had spent hours preparing for this hearing. She had read all of Marcus's military records and spoken with the staff at New Horizons. "Your Honor," Jennifer began, "I request that this court modify Sergeant Williams's sentence based on new evidence of his military service and the circumstances that led to his current situation." Patricia listened as Jennifer presented Marcus's military record. She described his 3 tours of duty, his leadership of a combat squad, and the roadside bomb attack that changed his life. Then Tom Bradley appeared on the courtroom's video screen from Ohio. He was wearing a suit and tie, and Patricia could see military bearing in his posture even through the computer screen. "Mr. Bradley," Patricia said, "please tell the court about your service with Sergeant Williams." Tom's voice was clear and strong. "Your Honor, I served under Sergeant Williams for 18 months in Afghanistan. He was the best squad leader I ever had. He cared about his soldiers like they were his own brothers." Tom described the day of the roadside bomb attack in detail. He told how Marcus had immediately taken charge despite being wounded himself. He explained how Marcus had carried wounded soldiers to safety one by one while under enemy fire. "Your Honor, Sergeant Williams saved my life that day. He also saved the lives of 5 other soldiers. I wouldn't be here today if not for his courage and leadership." Tom's voice became emotional. "When we got back to base after that attack, Sergeant Williams blamed himself for the soldiers who died. He kept saying he should have taken a different route, that it was his fault. But, Your Honor, there was no way he could have known about that bomb. He made the best decision he could with the information he had." Dr. Lisa Rodriguez testified next, also by video conference. She explained Marcus's injuries and the long-term effects of traumatic brain injury and PTSD. "Your Honor, Sergeant Williams suffered significant brain trauma in the explosion. This type of injury can affect memory, judgment, and emotional regulation for years after the initial trauma. Combined with severe PTSD from losing soldiers under his command, it's not surprising that he struggled to adjust to civilian life." Dr. Rodriguez continued. "What is remarkable is that despite these injuries, Sergeant Williams continued to function as a soldier long enough to save 6 lives. That shows incredible mental toughness and dedication to his duty." Then Patricia did something unprecedented. She asked Marcus to speak directly to the court about his experiences. Marcus stood up slowly, still wearing his Bronze Star. His voice was quiet but steady. "Your Honor, I want to thank you for looking into my case. I know I broke the law, and I accept responsibility for that. Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. When I came home from Afghanistan, I thought the war was over for me, but it wasn't. Every night I fight that same battle over again in my dreams. I see Johnson and Rodriguez getting killed, and I can't save them no matter what I do. Several people in the courtroom were wiping their eyes. I tried to get help from the VA, but the paperwork was too hard. Every time I tried to write about what happened, I would start shaking and couldn't finish. So I gave up and started drinking instead. Marcus looked directly at Patricia. Your Honor, I'm not making excuses for my behavior. I chose to drink. I chose to give up. But if you give me another chance, I promise I'll try to get better. I owe that to Johnson and Rodriguez. I owe that to the soldiers I saved. And I owe that to myself. Patricia was deeply moved by Marcus's words. 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood in front of the city council chambers wearing a clean suit and tie. His hair was cut short and neat, and his eyes were clear and focused. He looked like the soldier he used to be, but with the wisdom that comes from surviving great pain. Today, Marcus was going to speak to the city council about veteran homelessness. It was his first public speaking engagement since completing the program at New Horizons Veterans Recovery Center. In the audience sat Judge Patricia Hoffman, along with Janet Rodriguez and several other courthouse employees who had followed Marcus's story. Tom Bradley had driven down from Ohio to be there. Even bailiff Bob Thompson was in attendance, wearing his dress uniform in honor of the occasion. Marcus approached the microphone with steady steps. 6 months ago, he had been shaking and confused in a jail cell. Today, he was preparing to advocate for other veterans who were still lost in the system. Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Marcus Williams. I am a United States Army veteran and a recovering homeless person. Marcus's voice was clear and strong. The months of therapy and treatment had helped him find his voice again. 6 months ago, I was arrested outside this very building for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. I was homeless, drunk, and suffering from untreated PTSD and traumatic brain injury. To most people, I looked like a failure and a waste of taxpayer money. Marcus paused and looked out at the audience. His eyes found Judge Hoffman, and he nodded respectfully. But one person took the time to look deeper. Judge Patricia Hoffman learned about my military service and the circumstances that led to my homelessness. Instead of just punishing me, she found a way to get me the help I needed. Marcus continued his story, telling the council about his service in Afghanistan, the roadside bomb that killed Johnson and Rodriguez, and his struggles with the VA system when he returned home. I want to be clear about something, Marcus said. I take full responsibility for the choices I made after I came home. I chose to drink instead of seeking help. I chose to give up instead of fighting for the benefits I earned. But the system made those bad choices easier by putting up barriers instead of building bridges. Marcus presented statistics about veteran homelessness in their city. He had spent weeks researching the issue with help from Dr. Chen and the staff at New Horizons. On any given night, there are approximately 200 homeless veterans in our city. Many of them are suffering from PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, or other service-connected disabilities. Most of them have tried to get help from the VA, but got lost in bureaucracy and waiting lists. Marcus pulled out a folder of documents. I have spoken with dozens of these veterans over the past month. Their stories are heartbreakingly similar to mine. They served their country with honor, came home wounded in ways that aren't always visible, and fell through the cracks of a system that's supposed to catch them. Council member Sarah Johnson raised her hand. Mr. Williams, what specific changes would you like to see? Marcus had prepared for this question. First, we need a veterans court similar to drug courts. This would allow judges to sentence veterans to treatment programs instead of jail when their crimes are related to their service-connected disabilities. Marcus looked at Judge Hoffman again. She had already begun working on establishing such a court. Second, we need better coordination between local law enforcement, the courts, and veteran service organizations. When a veteran is arrested, there should be a system in place to quickly identify their military service and connect them with appropriate resources. Marcus continued with his recommendations. He proposed a veteran outreach program that would place counselors in jails and homeless shelters. He suggested streamlining the VA benefits process for veterans with documented service records. He recommended job training programs specifically designed for veterans with disabilities. Most importantly, Marcus said, we need to change how we think about veteran homelessness. These aren't lazy people looking for handouts. These are men and women who served our country and came home carrying invisible wounds. They deserve our help, not our judgment." When Marcus finished speaking, the council chambers erupted in applause. Several council members were wiping their eyes. Even the usually stern council chairman seemed moved by Marcus's presentation. Councilmember Johnson spoke first. "Mr. Williams, thank you for having the courage to tell your story. What you've proposed makes a lot of sense. I'd like to see us move forward with these recommendations." Other council members voiced their support. Within an hour, the council had voted unanimously to fund a pilot program for veteran services based on Marcus's recommendations. After the meeting, people crowded around Marcus to shake his hand and thank him. Many of them were veterans themselves or family members of veterans. Judge Hoffman approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. "Marcus, I am so proud of you. Look how far you've come." Marcus smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Judge Hoffman, I can never thank you enough for giving me that chance. You saved my life. You saved your own life, Marcus. I just pointed you in the right direction." Janet Rodriguez hugged Marcus tightly. "You did amazing up there. Johnson and Rodriguez would be so proud of you." At the mention of their names, Marcus's expression became serious but not pained like it used to be. "I hope so. I finally feel like I'm honoring their memory instead of dishonoring it." Tom Bradley was the last person to approach Marcus. The two men embraced like the brothers they had become in combat. "Sergeant, you did good tonight," Tom said. "You're going to help a lot of veterans with what you're doing." "That's the plan," Marcus replied. "I can't save Johnson and Rodriguez, but maybe I can save some other people's Johnson and Rodriguez." 3 months later, the Veterans Court that Judge Hoffman had championed was officially established. Marcus was hired as a veteran liaison, helping to identify veterans in the criminal justice system and connect them with appropriate services. On the 1-year anniversary of his arrest, Marcus returned to the courthouse steps where Detective Sarah Martinez had first found him. This time he was there for the dedication ceremony of the new Veteran Services Program. A small plaque was being unveiled near the courthouse entrance. It read, "In honor of all veterans who have served our country and in memory of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. No veteran stands alone." During the ceremony, Marcus spoke briefly about his journey from homeless veteran to community advocate. He talked about the importance of second chances and the power of people who care enough to look beyond the surface. "A year ago, I was sitting on these steps, drunk and hopeless," Marcus said. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left to offer the world." Marcus looked out at the crowd, which included many of the veterans he now worked with. "But I learned something important this year. Rock bottom can be a foundation if you use it to build something new. Pain can become purpose if you're willing to do the work." After the ceremony, Marcus walked to his apartment, a small but clean place that he had earned through his work at the Veteran Services Program. On his kitchen table sat 2 framed letters. The first letter was from Johnson's widow, thanking Marcus for finally reaching out to her and for honoring her husband's memory through his work with veterans. She had told Marcus that Johnson would have been proud of what he was doing. The second letter was from Rodriguez's mother, who had driven 300 miles to attend Marcus's first speaking engagement. She had hugged Marcus afterward and told him that her son had always believed in helping others, especially those who were struggling. These letters had helped Marcus finally forgive himself for the decisions that led to the roadside bomb explosion. He understood now that Johnson and Rodriguez would want him to live to help others, and to find meaning in his survival. Marcus also kept his Bronze Star displayed on his bookshelf, not as a reminder of his guilt but as a symbol of his capacity for courage and service. He had learned that heroism wasn't just about what you did in combat, it was also about how you picked yourself up after falling and used your experience to help others. Judge Patricia Hoffman had also changed significantly over the past year. She had implemented new procedures in her courtroom to identify veterans and other defendants who might benefit from treatment instead of traditional punishment. She had partnered with social workers and mental health professionals to provide better options for people with underlying issues. Patricia's approach to justice had evolved from purely punitive to more rehabilitative. She still held people accountable for their actions, but she also looked for ways to address the root causes of criminal behavior. The Veterans Court had already helped over 50 veterans get treatment instead of jail time. The success rate was remarkable, 85% of participants completed their programs and had no subsequent arrests. Janet Rodriguez had been promoted to court administrator, partly in recognition of her dedication to Marcus's case. She continued to research defendants' backgrounds when time allowed, looking for stories that judges needed to hear. Every few months, Marcus would visit schools and community groups to tell his story. He talked about military service, PTSD, and the importance of taking care of veterans. He always ended his presentations with the same message: